Hi there. We're just waiting for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We're excited to explore how you can create a better experience for your frontline employees, helping to drive engagement, improve safety, and reduce stress. We're excited to have you with us today. Today's webinar will be approximately 35 minutes. We won't have live Q&A after the webinar, but feel free to enter questions and comments in the chat, and we'll follow up with you after. We'll also be sending everyone a link to the recording of the webinar. My name is Ben Skelton, and I'm the Vice President of Habanero, and with me is...
Hi, I'm Will Hardy, Practice Lead for Employee Portals.
Perfect. So today we're going to cover 4 areas. First, we'll explore the fieldworker opportunity. Second, we'll take a look at common barriers that have often gotten in the way of engaging with this important audience. Third, the fun part, we'll take you through a demo of a traditional office worker experience and then a personalized fieldworker experience. Finally, we'll end with some considerations when creating your business case to target the front line. For those of you that aren't familiar with Habanero, we help organizations create better experiences for their employees and customers. This may include assisting an organization in better understanding and living their purpose and values, building stronger communications and community experiences, or supporting them through a digital transformation. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the fieldworker opportunity. When looking at the fieldworker opportunity, I think it's useful to take a step back and examine the last 3 years. Let's take a peek at how things have or haven't changed. The last 3 years have been hard for everyone, with a lot of added stress, the loss of connection to friends and peers, and the challenges in managing work with additional caregiving responsibilities. However, when we take a look at the traditional office worker, there's been a lot of change, and some of it's been positive. Humor me for a second. Let's take a step back in our magic time machine to a little over 3 years ago. Many of us were using outdated tools and technology. Our organizations might have slowly started to deploy and or adopt Teams, but many of us were still using Skype for Business. Do you remember how bad Skype for Business was? Ugh. That all changed quickly, and within a few weeks, many of us were using Teams or Zoom, Microsoft 365, and you might have even received a nice little technology upgrade from your IT team. Second, we had much more flexibility with work location. At the beginning, this was pretty much home, but we're still seeing many organizations provide much more flexibility than they had in the past with where people work. Finally, some organizations even embraced schedule flexibility, enabling their employees to work around caregiving responsibilities. For the most part, the way the traditional office worker works has changed. Now let's take a look at our frontline employees. It's hard to put rose-colored glasses on when looking at the lives of our frontline employees over the last 3 years. There's been limited IT investment on the front line, as the big focus has been placed on operational technology. Although there's obviously a benefit to better operational technology, communication, collaboration, and community tools for the field haven't really been part of the picture. Second, many frontline employees don't have control over location and schedule. They need to come into a retail location, go to their hospital, support utility infrastructure in the field, or maybe go to a mine site. Finally, working conditions have been as challenging as ever. Of course, many field worker jobs are physical and demanding. However, I'm sure all of you have seen the TikTok videos of customers treating frontline employees poorly or aggressively. Very few frontline employees would say that the last 3 years have been fun. This is distressing as we have to remember that 80% of the global workforce are frontline employees. And the top industries are agriculture, education, healthcare, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, transportation, and construction. That's a lot of people. Microsoft has been doing an incredible amount of research as of late as part of their Work Trend Index series. There's some great stuff there, and I'd urge you to check it out. In January of 2022, they released a report exploring findings from a comprehensive survey of 9,600 frontline employees and managers in 8 industries across 5 continents. One of the questions they asked was what can reduce stress on the front line? The results were kind of surprising. Number one, as you might expect, is a pay increase at 64%. Number two was taking paid time off from work at 50%. And what's kind of interesting is that number three is better technology tools that make my job easier. This is slightly higher than a more flexible schedule and more staff for my team or department. Another interesting finding is that clear and transparent communication from management is at 44%, tied with more staff from my team or department, which is higher than taking frequent or regular breaks, childcare, or even control or autonomy in day-to-day tasks. These are some really telling statistics that clearly illustrate the importance of extending our platforms and tools to the frontline. When we look at today's communication experience with our frontline employees, it's often lacking. Typical communication channels are daily huddles, which can be useful, but often focus at the job at hand or safety. A frontline worker's manager or leader, which is great, but sometimes the message or communication is not delivered. If you have 3 employees with 3 different managers, they often receive 3 different messages. The policy wall. I've been to countless organizations where communication with the frontline is a board in the lunchroom or hallway that includes communication from corporate, as well as all of the policy and procedure changes to be aware of. Some organizations rely on posters or digital signage, which are great for simple messages, but they don't really facilitate storytelling. Finally, some organizations have shared kiosks, but many don't provide a compelling experience. But we can do better. There are a ton of ways we can empower our frontline teams. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. For retail employees, this could include providing them with product updates and promotions. There's nothing more frustrating for a customer than describing to a frontline employee a promotion that they aren't aware of. Product recalls. This is important for many retail organizations, but can be essential in a grocery store or other location where food safety issues are top of mind. Corporate news and updates. As the Microsoft research shows, this is something that employees are looking for. Communities, which can be used for ideation, customer and product feedback, or connection with peers. Task management and merchandising to ensure consistency across locations. Health and well-being information. It's exciting. More and more employers feel that they have a role to play in helping their employees live healthier, happier lives. HR information. Many frontline employees I talk to say that it's so painful to access HR information, from policies to benefits to information from their pay stub. And finally, learning and development. From a field perspective, some of the list is the same, but there are a couple of other ways we can add value. The first is operational alerts and updates. It's important that your employees know how road closures impact them, operational restrictions and our constraints, and are kept informed during an incident or changing conditions. Safety. Safety is essential in all organizations, but especially for those that have a big field worker presence. Safety updates, toolbox talks, safety stories, they should all be available with a click. Also, easy access to policies and procedures is important. The risk with printed policies and procedures is that they can quickly become out of date, which can lead to confusion at best and a safety issue at worst. Having online access to the latest policies and procedures and being notified about substantive changes to any policy can be very important. And similar to our retail teams, corporate news and updates, communities, health and well-being, HR information, and learning and development are all important for our field as well. That was a huge list of stuff. You might be wondering, how can we deliver all that? Well, it's time to turn it over to Will.
Thanks, Ben. So as we just described, we feel there's a really compelling case to be made for connecting and empowering frontline workforces with better experiences. With the massive acceleration and modernization of digital workplaces that we've seen over the past 3 years, we feel the time and conditions are right to extend to the frontline. While there's a range of point solutions that are available to communicators these days, many of you are likely leveraging Microsoft 365 in some way already. So one of the key questions to ask is, how can Microsoft's tool set better support frontline scenarios? And do they present the capabilities that you need to do an effective job of it? Thankfully, we see a growing foundation of capabilities that can support the frontline far better than before. Again, with the rapid adoption we've seen in recent years with tools like Microsoft Teams and a push to the cloud, largely to support hybrid and remote work, Microsoft now has a pretty compelling platform that can be extended out to frontline workforces too. Teams offers robust mobile-first app experiences that provide modern, secure, and low-barrier options to connecting with frontline audiences. Teams is clearly at the center of Microsoft's development roadmap these days, continually adding in app layers to the platform, like their collection of employee experience apps known as Viva. Viva Connections can create targeted experiences to serve up important content, tasks, and actions tailored for frontline audiences. It can also support integration with other enterprise systems to serve up data to employees in a single and familiar location. Viva Engage was recently announced as a new brand for Yammer, a platform that has long had the potential to make organizations more open and transparent, breaking down regional and departmental silos and better connecting colleagues across corporate and frontline roles. It can give frontline workers more of a voice and a platform to be heard, bubbling up ideas and innovation from the ground up. And while historically SharePoint hasn't always been considered a central frontline tool, modern SharePoint has the potential to change that, with responsive mobile experiences and content that can be embedded into the Teams app. SharePoint-based content is now much more accessible. It can empower frontline with better access to knowledge and content to help close that communication gap. Outside of those foundational building blocks, which are generally applicable across all types of audiences, Microsoft has also put a focus on developing specific capabilities aimed at transforming frontline worker experiences with functionality that is more operationally focused. These include apps that are built right into Teams, such as shift management and time tracking with Shifts and Time Clock, task management and tracking with Tasks and Approval, mobile staff communication with chats and calling and walkie-talkie, and improving the employee personal connections with virtual visits. These tools ultimately help to increase the value and return on investment, and they encourage better adoption with operational use cases. They cement Teams as a single and central platform. But what about the licensing costs for all this? One of the historically significant barriers in connecting with the frontline has been budgeting for the licensing and the significant cost hurdle that that presents. Now, I know this slide might look overwhelming, but don't worry, it's not about reading it. It's ultimately meant to show that there are lots of licensing options to consider. With Microsoft 365, every user needs a valid license and account. You pick your user SKU level and pay a monthly or annual subscription license per user. SKUs can vary by capability and applications that are included, with E3 and E5 being the most common for office workers. We've heard Microsoft has seen extremely high adoption of the E5 SKU across enterprise organizations. But for frontline workforces, this is likely overkill from a capability standpoint and expensive when you consider the large numbers of licenses that frontline workforces would involve. So Microsoft introduced the Frontline Worker SKU options, or FSKU, which have a focus on the core essential capabilities that make most sense for frontline audiences, things like Teams, SharePoint, or accessing an Office document. The price point on the FSKU licensing is much more affordable, making it a more realistic option for licensing the frontline and less of a financial hurdle without compromising on security or needing to support yet another technology suite. Licenses can also be granted, revoked, or reassigned as needed, making it easier to scale up and down and flex with workforce changes. So let's shift now to look at some of the common barriers that most organizations face in trying to bridge the gap with frontline workforces. There can be many hurdles to overcome in this journey. First is the reality that many organizations have a collection of older legacy technologies that are outdated, clunky, and not well positioned for extending content to specific audiences. Many are likely hosted on-prem and commonly require more onerous authentication steps like VPN access. This puts up restrictive barriers to access and ultimately the experience isn't great. We've just talked about licensing costs, which no doubt has stalled many initiatives in the past. This will likely be a major focal point of any business case, even with the lower licensing cost options, as it can be a net new operational cost expense for many. Previously, many organizations felt that the barriers weren't worth solving. It was going to be too expensive, too time-consuming, too difficult, and the expected return ultimately wouldn't make it worthwhile. But we do feel the conditions have changed and the cost-benefit equation is shifting, making for a slightly easier business case. With the all-in shift to the cloud that has occurred already for most, the improved quality and mobile-first nature of the tools, advances in security, and the more flexible licensing options that are now available, we do see more organizations now considering or actively planning to connect with the frontline. But there are other common barriers to consider that can also impact success. First is the relatively high rate of staff turnover frontline workforces typically see, especially in sectors like retail. They tend to have higher rates of turnover with new employees coming on board, and in some cases, scaling up just for short periods. That leads to higher overhead and administration when it comes to user management and the task of onboarding and offboarding all those employees to the applications and systems. And coupled with that is ensuring that user counts are managed properly and that users have a valid license to authenticate securely and are granted appropriate access to content and systems in a way that doesn't put the organization at risk. Typically, frontline workforces would not always have their own unique user account credentials or corporate email account, so this involves a fair amount of change management, especially for IT. Access aside, we also know that frontline workers don't always have the time and opportunity built into their workdays to consume news and other intranet content. With their focus on operational tasks and the need to get work done and with busy schedules, this can be a challenge, sometimes relying on employees accessing content off shift or from home. Union considerations on accessing work systems outside of work shifts can also be a factor here too. Further to this, systems that serve up content without relevant focus on frontline perspectives or are too corporate-centric or don't have an obvious benefit to frontline workers negatively impact the incentive for repeat visits and adoption. Related to time is getting access to devices to connect. Unlike office workers, field workers often have extremely limited number of physical devices or workstations, such as a shared kiosk or a tablet to access content and systems. Many will have personal devices, but organizations need to have appropriate mobile device management strategies and policies in place to safeguard granting access to corporate systems and applications. Unfortunately, there's no magic solution to any of these barriers. Most involve a close partnership between communications IT to keep the broader, bigger picture benefits in mind when considering the change management, the technical, and the administrative effort that's involved. So with that, let's take a look at what a better experience could look like. I'll pass it back to Ben.
Now the fun part, a demo of personalized fieldworker experience. The demo you're going to see today is built on Microsoft 365, Microsoft Teams, Viva Connections, Viva Engage, which used to be Yammer, Modern SharePoint, and Habanero's Go intranet. If you're not familiar with Go, we built it to help people create exceptional intranets on Microsoft 365, Teams, Viva Connections, and Modern SharePoint. We built it for organizations that want to stick to the Microsoft roadmap. I often joke that we built Go for people that don't want to use Go. They wish the Microsoft platform would provide what they need to create a great intranet, but understand that there are gaps, but they don't want to be locked into another platform. Finally, it's deployed into your Microsoft 365 tenant. That means that security and content are still under your control. So today, we're going to go through a personalized fieldworker demo. But before that, we'll take a spin through the experience a traditional office worker sees, so you'll be able to understand what's different between the two experiences. So with that, let's take a peek at the office worker experience. Welcome to the Loom intranet. Loom is a fictional company that builds, markets, sells, and rents homes in Canada and the US. Right now we're logged in as Tim. Tim is a traditional office worker. The first thing you'll notice is that the intranet lives in Microsoft 365, so all our tools are one click away. Because we're leveraging modern SharePoint, we've got the modern Microsoft 365 search experience. This allows us to search intranet content from Tim's collaboration sites that he's a part of, Tim's OneDrive, and even other repositories like ServiceNow. Below that, we can see the navigation for the intranet. Right now, we've got news, events, policies and resources, employee essentials, and even information on health and wellness. If I scroll down slightly on the page, you can see 3 featured news items, everything from a care package coming our way to meeting Sylvie, our newest sales and marketing coordinator. Below that is the Viva Connections dashboard. The dashboard is made up of a series of cards called ACE cards, which stands for Adaptive Card Extensions. There are several out-of-the-box ACE cards. Different third-party vendors provide ACE cards, and you can build your own ACE cards using SPFX or the SharePoint framework. ACE cards are an important part of the Viva Connections experience. Here you can see I've got several ACE cards. One about an employee survey where I can share my hybrid work preferences, an icebreaker to build connection in the organization, and my assigned tasks. It looks like I have 4 past due. You can also see a third-party card here, a ServiceNow card, where I can see that I have 2 tasks pending. If I scroll down further on the page, I can see what's happening at Loom. The What's Happening component rolls up corporate news, Teams conversations, and Yammer in one place. So you can see here, our organization is speaking at the Net Zero Construction Conference. There's a celebration of an amazing career. And even below here, you can see we've actually got a roll up of a Yammer post. So there's a potluck coming to the Toronto office. News can be filtered by topic, department, or type, and you can select your preferences. Below that, we've got My Apps. My Apps are the apps that Tim has pinned on his homepage for easy access. You can see here he's got financial approvals, procurement and contracts, expenses, and the IT help desk. Below that, we've got upcoming events. These are things that are going on in the organization, and these are driven by Tim's specific preferences. So I can choose to see only events for certain locations or certain types of events. As I scroll down, I can see announcements. These are short, timely snippets of information. Everything from our rental apartments in Anaheim are ready to go to the fact that our Hamilton condos are approved. Below that, we've got recognition. Recognition is a place for employees to recognize each other for doing a great job and living the organization's values. Below that, we've got some information on our new employee onboarding process in this rich banner. And below that, we've got our health and safety progress, which is really important for our organization. Of course, I can see what's going on with equipment breakdowns, reported accidents, new employees trained, and I've got one-click access to see our latest KPI report. And finally, at the bottom of the page, I've got our culture and pictures. This is a place to celebrate our culture and for me to learn what people do across the organization. You may have noticed this bar on the right-hand side. This is what we call the springboard. This is where I have got access to a people finder so I can find people across the organization. I can see the announcements or My Apps and quick links. I can see my ServiceNow requests, my benefits, stock information, time zones, and even the weather. So this is our office worker experience. Now let's talk about our field worker experience. Now, before we take a look at our personalized field worker experience, I thought it would be helpful to show the out-of-the-box Viva Connections experience. As you can see, it's primarily focused on the Viva Connections dashboard and the associated ACE cards. If you have a lot of useful components on your homepage, you won't find them here. You can also click Feed at the top for an automated feed, and you can click Resources to dive into intranet content. It's a very simple, streamlined experience, but might not provide your field with everything they need. So let's take a look at our field worker experience. Because this is a field worker demo, I thought we'd do it on a mobile device. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the Teams app icon. You can see right now I'm in Teams and I'm in the default activity panel. At the bottom of Teams, you'll notice a few different icons. We've got Activity, Chat, Teams, Calendar, and Loom. The Loom intranet app has been deployed to Teams via corporate policy, so it's easily one touch away. When I click on the Loom intranet, you'll notice a few things. First, we've got a warning that we didn't see in the traditional office worker scenario. Ice rain and hazardous conditions are expected for the next 48 hours. Use extreme caution in all vehicles and on all sites. Below that, you'll notice something kind of unique. You don't see the featured corporate news right at the top. Because this is a field worker example, we actually felt that it was more important to show operational updates. We're using SharePoint's targeting behind the scenes to show and hide different components that are relevant to the different audiences. Here you can see we've got 4 operational updates. There's a road closure, there's processing equipment maintenance, there's an upgrade deadline for our safety gear. We've got to update our Generation 6 safety gear and have it in place by April 31st. And there's a reminder to select my Flex Plan benefits. Below that, you'll see the Viva Connections dashboard, but you'll notice something a little different here. We have different dashboard cards that are targeted to this audience group. You can see we start with Microsoft Shifts, but there's nothing that's been scheduled for me at this time. There's also a survey for my feedback on that new Generation 6 safety equipment. I've got 1 past due assigned task. There's a remote site commuting policy to update, and perhaps I want to learn something new. There's a Viva Learning card that takes me into Viva Learning to learn something new. Below that, you can see we have the corporate news. You'll notice that we have 3 corporate news items: staying safe at work, the news article on speaking at the Net Zero Construction Conference, and celebrating an amazing career. Congrats to Gregory Williams. You'll notice a few things. In the office worker scenario, we had 6 news cards, but in the field worker scenario, we pared it down to 3 cards. We also didn't include Yammer posts in this because we felt it might be confusing for this audience and we wanted to separate that out. Below that, you'll also notice something a little different: our health and safety progress. This was included in the office worker demo, but was much lower on the page. For this audience, we felt it was more important that the health and safety progress appears higher on the page so people can get this important information. If I scroll down, you can see upcoming events. You will notice too that the upcoming events have changed based on Sam, our field worker's preferences. So there's no pottery class here, but there is a webinar on how industry leaders are shaping the future of safety through culture that Sam might register for. We've also got our annual donation drive, trivia night, and Taco Tuesday. If I scroll down, you can see employee recognition. This is the same as we saw on the office worker demo. And if I scroll a little further down, you'll see something new here. This is community highlights, and this rolls up 3 recent Yammer posts. This helps people understand what Yammer is and actually helps advertise the various communities that people can be a part of. Below that, you'll see something familiar: our culture in pictures. This is often how we like to close out a page. This drives a lot of engagement to portals, and people love to see pictures from across the organization to help understand the projects people are working on, or ultimately what people do. Now, if you remember in the office worker demo, we had that bar on the right-hand side called the springboard. Of course, we don't have that in the mobile experience, but you will notice at the bottom we do have a springboard tab. If I click the tab, you can see that I've got all those important tools and they're just one touch away. So I've got my people finder, I can click on that, and I can actually search for somebody. Why don't we search for Tim? And you can see here I've got Tim's information. I can click to call, or maybe I can chat with Tim. I can also use the icon bar at the top, and I can actually go through my various tools in my springboard. So perhaps I want to see my benefits. I can see my wellness allowance, my technology allowance, and even my vacation time. And of course, all of the other tools are there too, like stocks, time zones, and weather. So let's close this in the bottom right, and we're back to our intranet page. I want to show you one other area that's really important for a field worker scenario, and that's policies and resources. If I click on the navigation at the top, you'll notice we've got a flyout there, and we've got news, events, policies and resources, employee essentials, our company, and safety. A slightly different navigation than you saw previously for the office worker. Let's click on policies and resources. And you'll notice we're now in the Policies and Resources Center. This allows us to quickly find those important policies, resources, tools, and templates that we need to do our job. Of course, I can search at the top, I can browse all the policies, or I might want to explore by type or by topic. Below that, I can see policies that have been recently updated. Perhaps it's the company travel policy or the paid time off policy. And below that, I can see policies that I've pinned for easy access. So if there's policies I use all the time, I don't even have to search for them. They'll appear at the bottom of the page here. Let's go into our paid time off policy. Here's our paid time off policy. If we scroll down, you'll notice that it talks about eligibility, sick leave, vacation, personal leave. But what's really cool is there's even acknowledgements. So I can acknowledge I've read this policy. This can be really useful for substantive changes to policies that you want to make sure that people actually read and acknowledge that they've read that change, especially when it relates to safety. And of course, I've got details about the policy, when it was created, updated, and who the author was. Now let's talk about creating your business case. As the demo illustrates, Microsoft 365, Microsoft Viva, and Go provide compelling value for your frontline employees. As you're creating your business case, you'll want to explore each of the areas you can add value to your organization. The first value area is improved productivity. While productivity is a result of many factors, there's no doubt that frontline-focused intranet can be a significant boost to productivity. This is especially the case if your intranet will host knowledge bases or service delivery resources. You'll definitely want to factor in reduced effort to find knowledge and or expertise.
Second is reduced attrition. Reducing turnover can produce significant cost savings for organizations. We know intranets can make a positive contributions to employee experience and reducing some of the common reasons that cause an employee to leave an organization. Employee survey feedback can be a useful place to start, and we'd recommend mining questions focused on connection, orientation to purpose, and connection to leadership as a good place to start. You'll also want to be on the lookout for feedback where employees express that they don't have proper tools on hand to do their job.
Third, stronger employee engagement. Many communicators consider their job as one that ultimately lends itself to improved employee engagement. While high engagement has many positive benefits, poor engagement can be detrimental to the organization. Intranets have an impact on how employees see, feel, and connect to your organization and its people. Well-crafted stories driven by insightful analytics that are targeted to the right audience will contribute to a stronger employee engagement.
Fourth is customer service. Empowered frontline team members who believe in your purpose and culture, are passionate and knowledgeable about your products and services, and have the tools they need are one of your greatest assets.
Fifth, better collaboration and stronger communities. In this area, you might be looking to improve the pace and participation in innovation, increase day-to-day connection and relatedness between teams, departments, and business divisions, and provide greater visibility of what teams and people do across the organization. Stronger collaboration means that you have less people reinventing the wheel.
6 is increasing connection to the organization and each other. Improving employee connection to the organization and to each other may be one of the top goals internet owners and communication stakeholders today have. Intranets have a long history of creating connections and fostering a sense of belonging. When people feel they belong to something, they are more likely to commit and give more of themselves.
Finally, 7th. This one might not be as sexy, but I've seen many business cases approved on cost risk alone. Are you using a legacy intranet platform that is expensive to maintain? Are you on an old unsupported technology that is no longer being supported and puts you at risk of cyber attacks? Are frontline employees in your organization using outdated policies and or procedures that are introducing risk? Hopefully, this helps provide a starting point for your intranet business case. However, if you want more, we've got a new guide coming soon to habaneroconsulting.com that will guide you through the process of creating an intranet business case. If you're interested, drop us a line and we'll make sure you get a copy. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hopefully, we've inspired you to provide a new set of modern tools to your frontline employees. If you've got any questions about Go, want a more thorough demo, or you're just bored and want to chat, feel free to reach out to Will and myself. Thanks again, and I hope everyone has a great day.